Alright guys, we're finally here. This is finally the end and last part of The Witch and the Holy Night. It's been a fun ride guys, and I gotta say, the story was just phenomenal. And I'm glad you guys stuck it all with me through, and if anything, hope you all enjoyed this one because this one's a long one. And if anything else, thank you all for love and support, and let's keep it going.
根源の渦っていうのは、すべての英知が記録された位置、すべての事柄が決定された場所。そこを見て、触れて、理解できれば、不可能なんて言葉すら作り変えられる。伝承によって呼び名は様々だけど、要するに神様のいる位置なんでしょうね。
神様っていうのは、八百万的なものじゃなく、
たまにそういうこと言い出すから厄介よね、あんたは。そりゃ万象に宿る神様もいるでしょうけど、これはその前。そういうのを決めた大前提みたいなものよ。そんなものの入り口がどうして岬にあったのかは知らないけど、祖父はそれを発見して、新しい魔法を作り出した。でも、その後に根源への道を閉ざしちゃったのよ。魔法さえ成立したのなら、神様への道は消えるべきだって。多分、私たちが生きてる限り解放する気はなくて、トウコはそれが腹立たしかったんだと思う。たとえ力不足で取り込まれても、道があるのなら試すべきだ。自己の消滅を恐れるぐらいなら、そもそも魔術なんて学ばなかったってね。でも祖父は礎になろうとする一切認めなかった。もっと強力な跡継ぎが生まれるまで根源の解析は許可しない。跡継ぎに魔法は譲るけれど、根源への道だけは閉ざしていたのよ。トウコの気持ちもわかるけど、私は祖父に賛成だわ。根源なんてものに興味はないし、第一、今まで一人も生還者がいないんだもの。それが本当に神々の座なのか保証もないし。
Her mood had gradually soured as she spoke, and towards the end sounded more like a list of complaints. Despite her words, however, part of Aoko was unable to agree completely with her grandfather's decision. Sojiro took note and followed up with a question about something he found strange.
青崎、一人も生還者がいないってどういうことだ？
根源に触れて帰ってきた者は一人もいないの。世界規模でね。触れれば即消滅。人間程度の魂だと触れた瞬間に元に戻るとか、根源に取り込まれるとか。なんで、どんなに歴史に名を残した魔術師でもあれにだけは触れていないわ。せいぜい間近にして大急ぎで自分の魔術を安定させた程度だもの。
Sojiro furrowed his brow at the oddness of it all.
それじゃあ、どうしてそこがそういう場所だってわかるんだ？
そりゃ、中に入って伝えた人がいたからでしょ？
でも生還者はいないって。
だから、そういう人たちは中で神様にでもなっちゃったんじゃない？
She spoke very matter-of-factly, as if it was only a minor detail about something that had happened the other day.
そうなればこっちに帰ってくる必要はないでしょうし、もしかすると単に帰ってこられないだけかもね。ま、神様って位置づけが私たちが思っているようなものとは思えないから、あまり幸福そうには思えないけど。
Whether they succeeded or fail in their endeavor, those who reach the root become unable to return to the normal world. Maybe the first person to become God felt lonely and spread the word about the swirl of the root in order to have others join them there. Or maybe they had so much work to do as God they just needed some help. None of it made any sense no matter how long Sojiro thought about it.
トウコさんはそうなりたかったのかな？
まさか、あの人は単に知りたかっただけよ。その後に残された人たちのことなんて興味はないの。昔から目標に没頭しても成果を愛する人じゃなかったから。 正直なところ、そのあたり姉貴は突き抜けてるわ。本当の天才ってのはああいう非人間のこと言うのよ。苦労して作り上げたものの、その後を全く考えないんだから。
Sojiro wasn't sure whether she spoke out of disgust or respect.
でも、そのくせ面倒見はいいっていうか。未来のことは考えないのに、今あるものには何にでも興味を持つんだから。
Aoko praised her sister's genius even while cursing her very being. Though her tone of voice was perfectly pleasant and lacked of any audible animosity.
そうだね。それに瞳子さんはこっちの方が好きみたいだったから。
As soon as he spoke, he was struck by the meaning of Aoko's earlier words. I don't care about the root. He realized that she must feel the same way as Toko. And so, there was one thing that had been bothering Sojiro regarding Toko.
そういえばカエルにするって一体。
He ventured to bring up the topic no one had been talking about since it occurred. It had always seemed taboo to bring up, so the sense of transgression made him hesitate, as he finally sought the truth.
一体も何も言葉通りの意味だけど、もともとルーン使いには変身術がある分、瞳子にはかかりやすかったみたいよ。
いや、そんな当然のように言われても。
His stomach hurt from the stress of not knowing how to respond to her cavalier attitude.
まあそれでどうやって。
He did not particularly want to ask, but it was the natural extension of his current line of inquiry. Aoko stared straight ahead as she lectured him, completely ignoring the pain expression on his face.
2種類あって、精神を入れ替えるのか、肉体を再編成するかね。精神だけを入れ替えるのは簡単な分、すぐ元に戻れるわ。夢を見ているようなものだし、ちょっとしたショックで元の体に意識が戻ってくれるから。厄介なのは肉体そのものを変えてしまう方で、この場合術が切れるまで元に戻るのは難しいでしょうね。私がやったのはその再編成の方みたい。多分塩基配列を組み替えるんだろうけど、もうちんぷんかんぷん。魔術が科学的な説明するのもナンセンスだし。
Aoko spoke as if it were not her own actions which we were discussing. Apparently, she had only been borrowing magecraft from her future self and could not use any of it in the present. Her actions had also created a looming threat that would come back to haunt them in 10 years' time. Trying to comprehend even a fraction of all the intricacies involved made Sojiro's head hurt.
あと数年後には青崎はそんなこともできるのか。末恐ろしいな。
Sojiro was being completely honest with her. In response, Aoko only stared ahead blankly, eyes open wide. She looked like she wanted to scold him.
アリスならそれぐらい今でもできるわよ。
なんだと。
やっぱりね、そんなことだと思ってたわ。前にも言ったでしょ。あんたはあの子を甘く見てるって。アリスの部屋のもろもろの人形はあの子に逆らった執事たちの慣れの果てなんだから。
まさかアリスはそんなことしないぞ。
いやいや、これが私もね、付き合い始めて半年はそう思ってたんだけどね。
And there's that smirk again. The light, cheerful laughter that followed only made her statement all the more chilling.
青崎、その冗談笑えないぞ。
あら、私は笑わせる気なんてこれっぽっちもないんだけど。
She was clearly making fun of him at this point. Unable to determine how serious to take what she had said, Sojiro's mood and expression only grew darker. His obvious dejection made Aoko smile with satisfaction.
あそこであんたの言葉にうなずいちゃうあの子がそこまで魔女になれるはずもないんだけど。
She gazed at him as they walked, her chest warm with emotion. The path they strode had shifted from footpaths through rice fields to a road climbing the mountain. It was surprisingly wide given the mountain's small size, though with no shortage of trees on either side. The forest road led them up to the top of the mountain. Wheel marks were etched into the dirt underfoot. No doubt Aozaki's family came through here by car. The only light at the summit was that of the moon and stars overhead. The bald mountaintop lacked streetlights and houses as well as vegetation. Near the top, the incline of their path began to even out. The road ended abruptly at a house still a good way away before them. It was too far to make out the shape of the building, but Sojiro assumed it was Aozaki's house based on the warm light coming from the windows.
ところで、君が家で団らんしている間、自分は何をしていればいいんだろう。
He had a hard time imagining her engaging in any sort of family bonding time, but with the effort he could imagine that it must be a joyful time for her. He did not want to ruin that by intruding, which is why he brought up the subject now. If he had to, he would not have minded spending the night camping outside. Her reply was not what he had expected.
君はうちの離れに行って祖父に会うの。多分、そこで今日までの記憶を消されるわ。
She stopped dead in her tracks as she spoke. The frank and open attitude she had shown all night was now gone.
え?
Sojiro was too shocked to take another step forward. He turned back to look at her, having been walking a little ways ahead, and realized she was not joking. He stood still, taking in the glaring silence. Naturally, Aoko was the first to resume speaking.
驚かないのね、あなた。
いや、驚いたけど。でも、それは初めから決まっていたことだ。そうか。それで青崎は俺を連れてきたのか。
退屈しのぎは本当よ。それとは別に、祖父があなたを連れてこいって言ったの。
Sojiro nodded in acceptance. He was as quiet and unchanging as the night around them, something which Aoko found thoroughly irritating.
それじゃあ行こうか。立っていると寒い。
宗十郎。
Aoko's voice stopped him in his tracks, just as he was about to resume walking toward her house.
あなたはそれでいいの？記憶を消されるってことは、今までの1ヶ月がなくなるのと同じなのよ。
Sojiro murmured in understanding. The thought of returning to his old self and forgetting about Aoko, Alice, and the mansion altogether felt like giving up a treasure that he had discovered. But he didn't feel that he was unable to let them go either.
確かにそれは嫌だな。青崎と知り合ってからの1ヶ月は楽しかったし、アリスとも約束したばっかりだし。でも、青崎が消えるわけじゃないんだろう。冬休みが終われば、また学校で会えるじゃないか。
There was no answer from Aoko. She did not tell him that he was not the only one who would be losing their memory. Intervention by her grandfather would erase her own memories of Sojiro too. Once it was done, they would most likely never even speak with one another again. Each would become just another random student at school. Even if they did happen to meet by some lucky circumstance, things would not be the same as they were now. She could not deny that a small part of her was going to miss him.
そう。なら行きましょう。
She rationalized her feelings away instead of processing them and set off once more toward the house. Sojiro followed along at her side. It was a matter of several minutes before they reached their destination. She was irritated to see that the expression on his face looked exactly the same as it always did. Forgetting their time together was sad for her, if only slightly so, but it did not seem to bother him in the least.
そりゃね。平気で自分の腕を叩き折れるやつに、そんな繊細なこと期待していないけど。
Halfway through muttering her complaint, Aoko suddenly remembered. Or rather, she realized something. Something about the one-time werewolf killer before her, and the mystery of who Sojiro Shizuki really was. The older version of herself that night had had memories and knowledge of Sojiro beyond what she knew now. Something about this seemingly average boy's mistakes. Why he was able to do what he did, and why he was raised in the mountains in the first place. She had always wondered, but never had the chance to ask him about it until now. Once her grandfather was through with them, all those questions she had about Sojiro would be gone too. There was no point in asking right before they had their memories erased, but then again, she might as well if she was going to forget everything anyway. This was her only chance to demand an explanation for his contradictory behavior.
待って。私も最後に一つ聞きたいことがある。あんた、山でどんな生活を送ってたの？
Her question stopped him on the spot. She had never seen him make such a pained expression.
つまらないよ、そんな話は。
面白い話は期待してないって言ったでしょ。どうせ私も宗十郎のことは忘れるんだから、それぐらい話してくれてもいいんじゃない？
Her words and demanding gaze caused him to lift his head in surprise.
忘れるって青崎が？
当然よ。あんたが忘れても私が覚えているんじゃ意味がないでしょ。お互いが忘れなくちゃ人と人の関係は立てないわ。行ってこいで公平じゃない。なんでそんな顔するの？
Sojiro's hand shot up to cover his mouth in response. He had no idea what kind of look he had been giving her, but he had a feeling it had been pretty pathetic.
そうか。青崎も忘れるのか。そこまでは考えていなかった。
ええ。そして私はあなたとは会わなくなる。断定はできないけど、まず間違いなくね。
Thus, this would be their last conversation. The way she spoke made it obvious even if he had not been aware of what awaited him inside. Sojiro might see her walk by his school and feel a desire to talk, but they would have no reason to interact. Even if he tried to strike up a conversation, he knew she was not the type to bother much with other people. More importantly, he was not the type to strike up a conversations in the first place. Not the way he had been a month ago, at least. That was when he finally realized how cruel it can be to forget something. Not only would he forget what they had done together, he would not so much as know her name or even be aware that she existed. Even if he felt strangely drawn to her, he would never understand why. And despite the fact that if some lucky twist of fate brought them together, things would never be the same. Their walk that night was no less than a funeral for both of them. He would essentially kill the person he knew as Aoko Aozaki, and she would kill the person she knew as Sojiro Shizuki. Afterward, nothing would remain.
だからその前に聞いておきたいの。嫌だって言うなら、あとはこのまま家まで直行するだけだけど。
それは寂しいな。うん。くだらない話だけど、会話がないよりはマシだろ。
Muttering under his breath, Sojiro set off towards the house once again. This time, it was Aoko who matched his pace. There were only minutes left before their path came to its end. The cold air turned their breath into white puffs that hung frozen in the dark night. Looking back on their conversation later, Aoko would think it seemed more of a confession than anything else. For Sojiro, however, it was like one long poorly told fairy tale.
山での暮らしは別にどうということはない。毎日同じことを繰り返して毎日同じことを教えられた。そこでは明日はないんだ。始まりが朝で夜になれば終わる。一日は次の日にはつながらない。だから明日を夢見ることもない。次の日を楽しみにするなんて言葉はこっちに来てから知った感覚だったな。初めは馴染めなかったし、馴染む気もなかった。けど、みんながまた明日と満足そうに口にする。いつの間にか、そういうものを夢見るようになっている自分がいた。
Sojiro kept walking as he spoke. He stared straight ahead as if telling his story to the night itself, not once turning to face Aoko. For her part, Aoko was utterly silent. She knew it was pointless to so much as nod or ask a question.
目が覚めていつもの一日に戻って、ふと気がつくと昨日までいた誰かがいない。訪ねてみると夜に体調を崩したらしい。たまにね、眠れなくなって家から出て行ってそれっきりな人もいたんだ。見なくなってしばらくした後、崖の下で見覚えのある遺体を見つけたこともあった。今にして思うとそれは異常なことだ。集まって暮らしていればそんなことにはならなかったのに、自分たちは関わらなかった。一日で完結する世界だったから他人は必要じゃなかったのかもしれない。山では食べるものも少なかった。飢えないためには他の人が寄りつけない場所に行くことが多くなる。その途中の道でいなくなってしまう人も多かった。山では誰も他人から奪うことを考えなかった。口にできるものを探すとき、気を配る相手は犬だの熊だのだけで人を気にすることはなかったんだよ。今はその逆になりつつあるけど。ともかく生活の半分はそれだけで済んでいた。
Sojiro continued to stare straight ahead. He did not seem troubled by his memories. To Aoko's ears, it sounded like he was describing a place no one in their right mind would want to live as if it were perfectly normal, almost as if he missed it. From that point onward, he slowly began to show more signs of distress as he spoke.
もう半分は、まあ、身を守る手段を教わっていた。学校の授業に比べたら些細なことだ。単に自分の体はどう動くものなのか、生き物はどう動くものなのかをよく見てよく考えろと言われた。単純な反復運動だ。小石を蹴ったり森の中にこもったり、まあそんな意味合いのことをやっていたんだ。あの決まり事が始まると朝も夜もなかった。外の変化に気持ちを向ける余裕はなくて、ふと気がつくと随分長く食事をしていないなんてのもザラだった。あ、ちゃんとご飯はもらえたよ。そういうのの後は。あれが何のためだったのかは今でもわからない。ただ山で暮らしていくには役に立ったし、そもそもあれだって生活の一部だった。生きるってことはそうすることだって思ってた。こうやって息をして歩くためにはあの繰り返しは当然のものだったんだ。
宗十郎、それは。
His tone was totally indifferent, but the strangeness of it all forced Aoko to interject. He glanced at Aoko and nodded as if to know he knew what she was thinking.
何かがおかしかったんだろう。あれは身を守る知恵じゃなくてもっと違う用途のものだった。たまにいなくなる知り合いは山の土になったんじゃなくて、他の場所で他の理由で消えた場合もあったんだろう。でも考えることさえなかった。精神の隙間を知れだの、命の勝ち負けを知れだの、意味を汲み取らないまま鵜呑みにして当然のように繰り返した。それがどう評価されるものなのか俺にはわからない。ただ知らなければ、外のことなんて知らなければ悩むことなく自分はそこに居続けられたと思う。
あなたの嫌いな生き死にの真似を続けて。
He did not respond to her question. From then on, they continued walking in silence. Aoko could not stop thinking about all the contradictions and absurdities in what he had said. The imbalance in his education for one. His knowledge of the basics of human life was thorough, yet he knew next to nothing about modern technology. He always said he was not good at socializing, but he seemed accustomed to talking and discussion. His upbringing could not have happened that way by chance. It was most certainly an environment purposefully constructed according to a play by some third party. Aoko had no idea what that plan could be or who the third party was though. Why would anyone want to create someone with a background like Sojiro's? Was it all part of a grander plan? Or was there really a place deep in the mountains where it was normal to live like that? He had asked about this once in his home in the mountains, apparently. When he expressed his confusion, an elder had taken him aside, saying, "This is just how things have always been around here, boy. There's no reason to keep doing it, but there's also no reason to stop." With a laugh, the elder chose a new identity and life outside the mountains for young Sojiro and sent him off to live on his own. Aoko's home loomed at the end of their path. It was a generic home without any real distinguishing features. It seemed as if a house from town had been picked up and dropped here. One could imagine the residents were peaceful people who engaged in farming and raising animals in their spare time. Gazing at what lay before him, Sojiro finally opened his mouth to answer Aoko's earlier question.
自分にはできなかった。知らなければよかったのに知ってしまったから。その後は簡単だ。泣けない鳥はいらないと言われた。今まで疑いもなくできたことを意味を知っただけでできなくなったものはいらないと。どんなに山にいたくてもできないのなら意味がない。俺は意味を知った瞬間に意味を信じることができなくなった。だから山を降りたんだ。けれど、そこではそうすることだけが全てだった。そうすることだけしか教えられなかった。だから。
There had been only one problem with his life in the mountains. Him for having questioned it. It was all his mistake. He muttered as much to himself, his voice dripping with criticism. In Aoko's opinion, the world he described was, in a sense, perfect. The best situation to achieve a goal is one in which all elements extraneous to that goal have been removed. As long as the people involved have no concept of morality, they will consider the immoral to be completely correct. No, even such correctness would be foreign in concept. Only one thing was for sure. The world he had come from was frozen in time. That was what made Sojiro's tragedy possible. A world of wrongdoing and mistakes had created a human riddled with mistakes as well. Sojiro understood that it was wrong, and yet he still thought it beautiful even now. Regardless of what the truth behind it might have been, he considered the world perfect. He only blamed himself for having learned what existed outside that world. He himself had said he could still be living there happily.
知らなければよかったのに。
He surely felt the weight of the sinful words he spoke more deeply than anyone else. That's why he still wondered. What had gone awry? Whose fault was it really? He did not want to answer these questions alone. He wanted her to state it clearly for him. There was a moment of silence that felt like an eternity before she spoke.
私には答えられないわ。
Her reply came quietly. It was not that she did not have an answer. It was that she could not tell him. It was a struggle for her to tell such a bold-faced lie. He reflected deeply on what she said. He knew right away that her words were coming from a place of kindness.
そうだな。君の最初の優しさが今でよかった。
A pleasant look floated across his face at which Aoko could only scowl.
何よそれ。まるで普段から優しくないみたいじゃない。
青崎は優しくないじゃないか。
She found herself unable to offer any protest against such a blunt statement. It was because she knew he was correct.
そうね。優しくなんかないわね、私。
Sojiro smiled in response to her vaguely sad consent as if to say, "Told you so." His indulgent smirk arose from his sense of personal pride in the situation. It was both warm-hearted and uncomfortable, causing Aoko to instantly regret her question. If only she had asked about something else, something random that did not matter, then she never would have ended up in a mood like this. Only a few minutes remained until their path came to an end. Surrounded by a wooden fence, the house resembled an inn for passing travelers in the winter. The light spilling out from the window brought to mind images of a lively dinner table, quite the opposite of the current mood between the two.
ごめん。悪いこと聞いちゃって。
Ako stopped at the entrance to the yard. She had felt compelled to apologize even though it was the last time they would speak, or perhaps because it was the last time. Sojo's only response was to shrug it off as if it were no problem.
話途中なのにね。
He looked up at the house they had hiked so far to reach, his breath hanging white in the air. All signs of gloom were gone from Sojiro's face as he nodded.
自分も話してみてようやく振り向けたと思う。だから青崎には感謝してるよ。それに、これはもう終わったことだ。続きを話すのはまた機会があった時にしよう。
He turned his head to face Aoko with an ephemeral smile. He was his usual nonchalant self, the same as every other day. Aoko prayed that day would never come. For her own peace of mind, but also for the well-being of this very unique boy.
もっとも、そんな機会はもう来ないか。
Then she pointed in the direction of a cave hidden by a small forest on the other side of the house.
あそこ、ちょっとした洞穴があるの。そこに祖父がいるから、行って。本当は、もっと違った話が聞きたかったけど、仕方ないか。魔法は12時になると切れちゃうものだしね。
A sarcastic grin spread across her face as she spoke, and so Sojiro walked off, totally clueless to what fairy tale she was referencing. The forest felt so far from the house to Aoko that it was like a different place on Earth altogether. In reality, it wasn't far at all, only 5 minutes away.
さよなら、しずきくん。
She said it to herself as she watched him simply walk away without turning back. Though he wasn't meant to hear her words of parting, they apparently reached his ears anyway.
ああ、じゃあまた明日、町のどこかで。
He raised his hand in farewell and then disappeared into the forest. As soon as she was sure he was gone, she turned her gaze to the sky. That night, the stars were even more beautiful than the moon. He had been looking at her fondly only moments before, and now he was gone into the forest with only a brief word of parting. It didn't feel real. And with that, she finally understood, if a little too late to matter. She understood who had truly been the strange and unusual one. Anyone could have ended up behaving like Sojiro, but not many could keep talking on and on the way he did. Everything he had done was now perfectly sensible in light of his former life in the mountains. As a magician, she was supposed to make miracles happen. But he had arrived at a miracle of his own through the trials and tribulations of following what he considered to be common sense.
素手で熊を倒すなんて、私にはどう転んでもできないし。
It was pretty impressive. Sojiro's own magic was so mundane to him that it made him depressed to talk about it, but even so, it was the kind of brilliance only possessed by humans. She pulled her eyes back down from the starry sky and began to walk. The lights were on inside the entrance and the door was unlocked. Aoko rolled up her sleeves and checked the time. 1 hour left till midnight. She had just barely managed to satisfy her parents' request to visit before the end of the year. Placing her hand on the door, she took a deep breath. She promptly stifled the faint affection and sadness she had been feeling. It was her first time back in 2 years. Upon entering high school, she had begun living on her own, hence the past 2 years away from home. And how they flew by. For some reason, the memories began to race through her mind. There she stood, one hand on the door, reflecting on the past. Once the door was open, she would be staring at her future instead. Her hand holding the doorknob began to move. She was met with the warm scene she expected, though strangely different than that of her memories. It was comforting to encounter something familiar after being away for so long. And so it was with small, unspoken gratitude that Aoko returned to her home. Without stopping to ring the doorbell, she called out with a smile, "I'm home." The moment Sojiro stepped inside, he was struck with a strange feeling of familiarity. It was not mere nostalgia either. No, it reached further back into the past. It was a feeling from far beyond what he could even imagine. He was reminded of someone, but he could not remember whom. Perhaps he was only reminded of himself, or perhaps of the old man before him now in the cavern. It appeared to be an old man anyway. Sojiro could not make out any details beyond the vague outline. As far as he could tell, the figure did not seem to have anything in the way of a face capable of making expressions. All he knew was that the smoke-like figure before him was the one Aoko called grandfather.
娘たちが世話になった。
Though hoarse, the old man's voice was powerful and it rung throughout the cavern.
これも縁だ。望みがあるのなら聞こう。
望みはないです。でも聞きたいことは一つあります。どうして二人を争わせたんですか？
それは私の外で起きた物語だ。答えることはできない。
そう仕向けたのはあなただと聞きました。
星の巡りだ。あれらは相入れない才能を与えられ、あのような形でしか噛み合えない人間だ。私の意図に関係なく、共にいればどちらかがきしみを上げた。だが、確かに衝突を避ける余地はあった。あれらの意志が凡庸であったか、あるいは破格のものであったのなら、多くの不順に耐えただろう。君のように自己の崩壊が見えていても共存を尊ぶように。しかし娘たちはそれを選ばなかった。
彼女たちが争うのは彼女たちのせいだって言うんですね。その原因はあなたにあるのに。
そうだ。あれらの争いはあれらの性を表すもの。原因というのなら私などゼロに等しい。
ゼロ？形がないということですか？
形ではなく意味がない。私という起因から起こり、娘たちが一つの命を得た時点で私は舞台から消え失せた。その後の因は常に娘たちから生じたものだ。私の介入はない。今回どちらが時間を終わらせても、あるいは両者が終わらせても私には無価値だった。いや、元より無価値だ。私に価値を与える命はまだ生まれていない。あれらがどうなろうとやるべきことは変わらない。
青子が生きていても死んでいても跡継ぎを作るということですか？
おそらくこの体が消えないのはそういうことだ。
The steamy energy that filled the cavern made Sojiro's head reel. The moment Aoko and Toko were born, their grandfathers seemed to have completely forgotten that they were his granddaughters. It was hard to imagine a satisfactory Aozaki heir ever being born. No amount of power would satisfy the old man. He showed no sense of compromise or restraint.
青子はそのために過去を捨てたのに。
There was nothing but silence. However, this short moment of quiet would occur only once. The unreadable outline of the old man grew blurrier still. Long, long ago, an unfortunate child once wandered into the cave. The old man automatically granted its request born from purity and ignorance. He was a magician who had given up his ego in order to extend his own lifespan, and he did whatever he could to help the child. It had been an incredible coincidence to happen that day. The child glared at the old man with tear-filled eyes at the sight of all the horrible things that had been brought about. Everything would be lost, completely and without any warning, all because of the failure of a nobody like you. The child threw a tantrum at how unfair it all was. The magician claimed that it was merely the way of the world. The child stood up to him. "Shut up, old man." And then? Yes, just at that moment, the child ran around in tears, trying to make the old man pay for the cost of a life. The cost of all the lives.
それは間違いだ、少年。
Perhaps that's how it happened.
捨てたのではない。それを美しくするためにあれは生きているのだ。
That role had likely come to an end long ago, however. The old man's appearance seemed to change before Sojiro's eyes. For just a brief moment, he wavered in the air as if in a haze.
君の過ちを正そう。娘たちは私というものをよく分かっている。ともすれば私本人より理解しているとも言える。私が娘たちの人格を考慮せぬように、娘たちもまた私というものの人格を認めていない。祖父さえいなかったのならという考えさえないだろう。あれらはそもそも争い合う自分たちを一度も卑下はしないはずだ。君にその関係を分かれというのは酷だろうな。尋ね事は終わったようだ。次は私の番だ。君の名前を知りたい。
Sojiro answered the old man's question. The smoky face seemed to frown, quivering ever so slightly.
意外だ。君は孤立しているというのに複数を示す名がついているとは思わなかった。似合わん。全く似合わん。だがそちらでは正しいことだ。不釣り合いな場所にいるのなら不釣り合いな名が必要だろう。希少ではあるがやはり無価値だ。すべてを肯定する諦めは死に由来するものだろう。続くものがない以上一代限りの才能は無価値だ。あれの行く末に影響を与えた君に興味を持ったが失望した。無駄な時間を過ごしたようだ。今は結ばれているがいずれ離れていくのは変えようのない結末だ。では立ち去りたまえ。私は死者に用はない。二度と会うことはないだろう。
Everything grew blurry. Sojo's memories began to fade. It had been a conversation without any answers, an encounter without any significance, now vanished completely like a dream. The air was cold, the sky beautiful. The evening sky at the end of each day looked different from the last. Each sunset could be seen for one day and one day only. Though the sky may not look dramatically different to the human eye, from one day to the next. Every day we wake up a new person and forget the beautiful sights, the moments of heartbreak, and all the other fleeting feelings that seemed so real the day before. Simple statements such as these felt all the more profound than the still air of the mountains, more bone-piercing than the winter cold itself. Sojo stared up at the sky as if he'd forgotten when and where he was. Aoko's look of stunned surprise brought him back to the present.
なんだ、早かったな、青崎。
Sojiro turned to face Aoko, who had only just stepped outside her family's yard. At first, she had been too shocked to move or speak, but she quickly regained her composure and marched forward. She continued until she was standing right before him, with an intense scowl on her face. Sojiro slouched instinctively, bracing for impact. He had not the slightest idea what could have made her so angry.
なんでまだここにいるのよ。
She was obviously irritated with him. In any case, the anger would have to subside before she could decide whether she was happy or sad to see him. Humans get angry when things do not go the way they had hoped.
さっきから10分と20秒も経ってない。なんでこんなところで突っ立ってるのよ、あんた。
It was supposed to have taken an entire day for her grandfather to erase his memories from the past month. She had been planning to let her grandfather handle all the details, and yet here Sojiro was, staring dumbly at the sky. He's no astrologer, he just likes looking at the night sky. Bombarded with Aoko's unspoken emotion, he proceeded to explain himself.
あの老人からの伝言だけど、記憶の消去は君の役目で人に頼るな。だそうだ。今日呼ばれたのは単に悪口を聞かせたかっただけらしいよ。
Hearing this, Aoko finally began to feel like herself again. Despite having been ready to dish out the punishment only a few moments earlier, she now felt quite calm.
そっか。人に任せるなんて、確かに私らしくなかった。
The intense look in her eyes slowly faded to her usual mildly irritated expression. It relieved Sojiro to see her like this. She was finally back to her normal self.
納得いったなら行こう。急がないと最終電車に間に合わない。
With that, he walked off without waiting for an answer. Aoko stared at his retreating figure for a brief moment before quietly cursing him under her breath and following after him. The descent back to the station was much easier than the way there. A sheet of darkness spread out below them. There in the middle of that ocean of black was a single light, the tiny glowing station. They walked for some time in silence. Aoko recalled their earlier conversation and felt she had been too naive. She should have avoided all the serious stuff if this was how things were going to end up. Sojiro, meanwhile, was thinking of nothing at all, just like usual. For him, this silence felt quite natural, while for her, it was awkwardly uncomfortable. Suddenly, Sojiro blurted out the strangest thing without thinking.
アリスにはお餅を買っていってあげよう。
Aoko's eyes grew wide, her pupils reduced to mere points. Aoko had so many questions going around in her head, she wanted to rail at the paradox that was Sojiro.
お餅が、何？
お土産。アリス一人で待っているんだから喜ぶと思う。
Aoko raised her hand to her head in concern. Unprotected by the warmth of a pair of gloves, her slender fingers were white from the cold.
あの子にはそういうの逆効果だけど、宗十郎がやる分には大丈夫か。
His seemingly selfless attitude came in handy sometimes. Alice would most likely accept this gift without making a scene.
そうね。確かにアリスはこういうの根に持って口に出さずに恨んでるたちだけど。また、なんだってお土産がお餅なの？
だって食べたことなさそうだろ、彼女。
All Aoko could do in response to such simple-minded observation was nod in agreement. The image of Alice eating mochi popped into her head, and suddenly the prospect of getting back to the mansion felt a little more exciting.
あんたって本当に無心よね。そういえば前から不思議に思ってたんだけど、いつからアリスと仲良くなったの？そのきっかけが私にはわからないんだけど。
Aoko peered at him the way she would at a strange specimen as he took a deep breath and launched into an earnest explanation.
大きなきっかけとかそういうのはないと思うけど、強いて言うなら初めて話した時かな。もっと確かになったのはロビーで話した時だろうね。
たったそれだけ？
ああ、親しくなるっていうのはそういうことだろ。
Sojiro seemed to find her question odd. The way he and Alice communicated went beyond words. Aoko could only assume that was how he did it.
そういえば、初めからアリスって呼び捨てだったものね、あんたは。
Oh, here we go.
そうだっけ？よく覚えていないけど。それより何を怒ってるんだ、青崎。
別に怒ってないわよ、私。
Yeah, you are. Her response was slightly cold, but also somehow gentle. They approached the halfway point of the mountain path. The night sky appeared more distant as they neared the bottom, and Sojiro continued to stare absent-mindedly at the stars. Then it finally hit her why his behavior had been bothering her since their ascent. She realized he must be feeling nostalgia. He missed the way the stars looked from up in the mountains.
青崎、
He spoke without looking down from the heavens.
一つ聞きたいんだけど、君に後悔はあるのかな？
Hands jammed in his pockets, his breath was white in the night air. Akko had the vague feeling somewhere deep inside that he was only a figment of her imagination.
どうしたの？突然そんなこと聞いて。
いいから答えて。聞きたいんだ。君に悔いはあるのかないのかを。
It was a sad thing to be asked. He would be hurt one way or another no matter how she answered. But he wanted an answer, and so she gave him one.
ないわよ、そんなの。だってそれをしないために今を頑張ってるんだもの。後悔なんてのはね、宗十郎。するものじゃなくて、なくしていくためにあるものなのよ。
Sojiro did not express any form of disagreement. Instead, he bit his lip and pushed down the flood of emotions that rose up inside him. He waved those formless, odorless forms with a small gesture of his hand still at his side.
そうか。後悔もなくなるものなのか。
Pain was subtly visible on his face as he spoke, and yet it was so vivid. As much as he wanted to, he did not have the strength to say it aloud. He was not like her, able to speak her mind so readily. Maybe someday. The sky and the darkness were both far away now. Tonight's grand view only to be seen this once. He hoped its beauty would remain in his mind forever. But what then of the regrets he had come to hold inside, of the days he had spent that now shone like stars in the sky? Would they too be with him forever?
いい空ね。街じゃちょっと見れないな。
Aoko mimicked Sojiro, looking up at the darkness overhead. The stars shone brighter here than in town. This clarity was thanks to the absence of any other lights amidst the darkness. Sojiro stared at her with almost a sense of loathing. As beautiful as the stars were, they were not the real thing. Not here.
そうだね。でも、ここでも手は届きそうにない。
Sojiro's sudden negativity caused it to turn to him in shock. The anger in his eyes had died down now. Taking a breath, he began to speak as if talking to himself. His gaze never left the stars.
山ではね、青崎。星は本当に手が届きそうなんだ。届かないのは分かっていても、望めばつかめそうなぐらい近いのに。都会の星は、そう思うことさえ許してくれない。
He was speaking of the sky in its purest state. The starry skies in the mountains far exceeded those of any urban planetarium. Their movement was like the pouring of rain. He spoke of the primal sky, unchanged from the past, the same sky humans had traced with their fingers since prehistoric times. For him, it was a past to which he could never return, a place to which he did not even know the way back.
今まで、目に映るすべてを山と比べていた。こんな場所は本当は嫌いだったんだ。今でも正直馴染めない。でも、いつか比べるのは街になってしまうんだろう。自分はこっちに降りてきてしまったんだから。
That was his one regret. He lowered his gaze from the stars and turned to Aoko. Her eyes were unusually hesitant and looked slightly hurt. Was it empathy they showed, or pity? Either way, he was the reason for the uncharacteristic look on her face now. He shut his eyes and nodded in response to her unspoken question.
うん。それは仕方のないことだ。ただ、そうなるのなら、そうなってしまう以上に、素晴らしいものを手に入れないといけない。後悔を、いつか、後悔と思わないために。
There was gratitude in Sojiro's voice as he confessed his feelings. Remnants from the past must one day be released. Loss must be overcome. He had lost it, his everything, the moment she had answered his query.
やめてよね。私の一言でいちいち人生観変えられちゃ身が重いじゃない。
She smiled weakly and averted her eyes as she spoke these hurtful words. Most likely she was being completely honest, and in that she was being true to herself.
それで、祖父と何を話したの？あの人が他人に興味を持つなんてすごいことよ。
The topic had finally been broached, and yet Sojiro said nothing. An empty reply can be used to buy time. They had nearly reached the flat road at the base of the mountain. The soft earth here would soon give way to the tightly packed dirt of the paths running between the rice fields. But before they got that far, Sojiro came to an abrupt halt. Closing his eyes, he listened carefully. He then gave a firm nod and turned to face Aoko.
おめでとう、青崎。
She blinked, not knowing what to make of it.
何よ、突然。
It was a perfectly natural response. The tension melted from his face as he said,
新しい年だ。
He now wore a smile full of joy. Dumbfounded, all Aoko could do was stare back at his calm visage. His surprise attack hit her so hard she thought she could hear the shrine bell in Yashirogi ringing in the new year. She had known it was the last day of the year, but had not given it much thought beyond that. And so his succinct words gave her quite the shock, as if the girl who believed in the power of the bell all those years ago had come back.
そっか。午前0時でもう新しい年なんだ。
She spoke in a hushed tone, as if this were shocking news. At the same time, a slight smile crept onto her face. A new year indeed. She recalled the first time she had worn a full-length kimono, how she had not been particularly uncomfortable or embarrassed, but not especially pretty either. The only pretty thing about her had been the moment she smiled at herself in the mirror. Seeing the warmth in her eyes, Sojiro closed his own in satisfaction. It made him happy to see her like that.
いろいろあったけど、新しい年を君と迎えられてよかった。
Was that a sincere smile? With that, he went walking off once more. The thought of Alice waiting alone was probably what spurred him into action. Aoko recalled his words as she walked alongside him. The moment he had declared the start of a new year, the way he had spoken so naturally, it made her suddenly feel like they had known each other for years. She could not be blamed for being filled with happiness at the thought. And yet a day would surely come when they would have to say their goodbyes. Until then, however, it would not do any harm to behave as if they were old friends. He was a naive yet incredibly unique young man. As they walked, she wondered how long this fleeting feeling of friendship would last. She looked up wistfully at the sky, just the way Sojiro had done earlier on their walk. Every star was out without a cloud in the sky. The two strode down the mountain path beneath the stars that lay ever beyond their reach. It was on a lazy Sunday morning that I discovered the book. Was I an intruder? No. Adventurer. Either way, I made my way into the forbidden Kuonji Estate Library. The book instantly drew my attention, as it looked like it had been intentionally hidden there on the bookshelf. It was large enough to double as a shield, and so took great effort for me to remove from the shelf. Flipping through, I realized it was a grimoire of rune magecraft, and a first edition at that. Surprised as I was by my find, my search came to a halt on the page I'd been looking for. It was the rune for memory erasure, that the Nordic gods had once used on the Valkyrie. For minutes I simply stared at the page where the rune methodology was laid out. And then finally, I shut the book. I returned it to the shelf and it had been harder to detect location than where I originally found it. That's when it hit me. I'd seen this book before somewhere. When and where exactly had I seen it, though? Yeah, it was when he first invited me to spend time with him. The girl sitting before me had it in the hand at the time. That must have been it. Unable to keep the smile off my face, I decided to put the book back exactly where I found it. It would be the most difficult to find when mixed in with the other books on the shelf. However, out of respect for her gracious efforts, I decided to pretend I'd never seen it at all. I shelved my discovery, so to speak. That's when I heard the shouting of a familiar voice in the main building. Lately, he seemed to have found his calling as a housekeeper, and had taken to cleaning every corner of the mansion. That was all well and good, but there were a few things that were off limits, which neither Alice nor I dared touch. He was the type to open things without asking, which put us all in hot water. There had been an uproar when he released the ghost ship that Alice's mother had kept around. Catching that little speed demon known as the Cutty-Sark had been quite the ordeal. I still felt bad for having to rely on that creepy golden wolf for help. And before that, he'd lifted the seal on the troop of spirits in the basement, which had led to the even creepier people from the church coming to the mansion for an entire week. Going back even further, there was also the time he'd ventured unsolicited into Alice's room. In the ensuing chaos, I fell into the mirror and we almost ended up in an all-out war with Alice. Come to think of it, he really and truly lacked any capacity for learning.
もういい加減にしてよね、あのバカ!
The good mood I'd been in up until that moment was spoiled, and I went dashing out of the library. I imagined coming upon the architect of my trouble standing there in the hallway and giving him the swift dropkick to the face he deserved. As far as I was concerned, that would be just another fun day in the mansion. And so, our little secret remained hidden on the bookshelf, likely never to be opened again. Alright everyone, so that was the end of Witch on the Holy Night. I gotta say guys, let me first say this. This whole visual novel has been nothing but a gorgeous ride for me, because it had the most beautiful artwork. The transitioning felt seamless in terms of how most VNs would be presented. They're usually static images, but this one just kept flowing like a comic almost. And it was I love the kineticism behind it, you know? As for the whole cast, I love them. I love Aoko, Alice, Sojiro. I think you all know my favorite part has been the whole confrontation between Beowulf and Sojiro, because if you didn't read this story, if you didn't read the Japanese version, you would have known what Sojiro was truly capable of. And I was so surprised. I was like, oh my god, this is great. And then the sad moments when his victory was cut short when he died, and only to have Aoko revive him after becoming a witch, which she would attain from the future. It's a weird spell she used, but I enjoyed every moment of this whole visual novel to begin with, and I look forward to the sequel that Nasu plans on making. I know it's not going to be for a while, but I just can't wait to come back to it and revisit this world and its cast again whenever that happens. All I'll say is that this game has me looking forward to the localization, if it ever does happen, of Tsukihime Remake, because that one is also that one is also the kind of thing I'm excited for, because Aoko is in that game, if only for a short cameo. She's the one that gives Tonoshiki his glasses so that he can help control his own mystic eyes. And to those that don't know what I'm talking about, you can look it up in the online. Tsukihime, or what was it? Was there? I don't think there was an English title for it, but it's called Tsukihime, and it's another good VN. But I'm looking forward to that when that comes out. If anything, guys, this whole VN has been nothing but a pleasure for me, and I'm glad you guys joined me on this. So, if anything, there'll be other VNs to come, and I hope you all join me on that adventure too whenever that happens. But until then, thank you again for all the love and support. I appreciate you all for sticking it out with me to this final moment. We're not completely done yet. We still got some bonus chapters to contend with, and afterwards, yeah, we'll be officially done with this visual novel. But all the while, I'll tell you all right now, 10 out of 10. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it immensely. It was great. And yeah, so if anything, guys, as usual, I'll see you all in the next one.